Perez. She will give some introductory remarks on the plenary agenda, and after that we will take your questions. Iratxe, please.
Buenos días a todos.
Good morning to each and every one of you. First of all, I should like to thank you all for being here at this press conference. This is a routine event at the beginning of the plenary week. So this week, in July, so we're coming to the end of the parliamentary session, but we've still got a few debates and quite a bit of work to do this week. And on Thursday, of course, I hardly need tell you, we will have a significant vote, motion of no confidence in the European Commission. It's been pending ever since the Commission took up office. Now, it was 11 years ago that we last had the tabling of a motion of no confidence in the European Commission. And as I said in the plenary, this confidence vote is being spearheaded by the right-wing group. So it is not going to be with the support of a Socialists and Democrats group. We are not going to be voting in favour of this censure motion. And this is not because we are 100% on board with everything that this Commission is doing. And I think that yesterday, in the course of the debate, it became abundantly clear what our group's position is on some of the excesses of the Commission, what the EPP is doing, along with other right-wing groups, and that applies to the parliamentary group as well as some of the commissioners. This kind of two-pronged strategy, this dual approach, trying to cobble together majorities. And I think it's important that they take notice of those positions. Basically, the time has come for the S&D group to call on the Commission to take their responsibilities. We've always been responsible, but we can't have a situation in which you are seeking to guarantee the stability of the EU and at the same time negotiating positions with the extreme right. Now, the socialists are not going to get into that kind of deal. That is why we believe that the Commission needs to change course. Now, this is in the hands of the European People's Party. This is in the hands of its president, Manfred Weber. It is important that he return to negotiations here in the European Parliament. Equally, it is in the hands of the President of the Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen. It is time that she revert to the positions and the priorities that this group has consistently laid down in recent months. My belief is, if you take a snapshot of yesterday, if you try and encapsulate what went on, I think there is a very clear message, and that is that the EPP is isolated. Yesterday, the extreme right was on the attack. It was attacking the EPP. This was a motion of no confidence in President von der Leyen, the EPP president. And then, on the other hand, the progressive parties, the S&D, but also the Liberals and the Greens, took a very clear line, one which I would emphasize, namely that we need to have a very clear steer or indication of with whom they wish to enter into majorities. You cannot have this dual approach. So, as far as we're concerned, no doubt about where we come down in terms of our vote. Now, on the other debates, you'll be aware, of course, that we have a very important event today. President von der Leyen will be appearing before the Conference of Presidents to give a presentation, broad brushstrokes of the next financial framework. And, of course, she will receive a letter that has been sent by the S&D group. We have a number of requests, demands and priorities, and we very much hope that in the course of today we will receive a reply to that letter. We do not believe in this idea of the national plans from each member state from a European perspective, because ultimately what that boils down to is a renationalization of European policies. In our letter, we also say that we wholly agree, as we've said on many occasions, that European defence is a top priority, a real challenge for Europe, and there has to be budgetary provision for that, but we cannot invest in defence to the detriment of our social programs or funding for environmental sustainability. We can't have deep cuts to those programs. We've got to make sure that everything is consistent with the kind of Europe we wish to promote. So we need to talk about our expenditure in social fields as well as in environment, and we are not going to support any kind of a financial framework in which the European Social Fund disappears. The Social Fund is a hallmark of Europe. Ever since it has existed, Europe really has stood for cohesion policy, and signals so far would suggest that those specific programs will be preserved, and I can assure you on behalf of the Socialists and Democrats we will not allow them to disappear. So we need a robust financial framework, and when we talk about conditionality, we need to make sure that we also talk about environmental, social and digital conditionality, not about macroeconomic conditionality, where you ask member states to put in place reform plans as a precondition for receiving European funds, because we've already seen what happens with that. A few years ago, we saw austerity. We saw Europe calling on countries to cut down on retirement pensions, cut down on investment in infrastructure and education in return for European funding. We are not going to get caught up in that kind of spiral. That is the dynamic we wish to avoid. We need support for economic growth and for industrialization, and there, of course, we are in favour. But again, let me stress that we, of course, will defend the European social model. Finally, on tariffs, we will have Commissioner Šefčovič, at our group meeting, and I very much hope that he'll be able to share with us recent developments. But, of course, it's very difficult to analyse the state of negotiations when you have a Trump administration, comes out every morning with a different piece of news. So, really, it leaves everybody scratching their heads, and is a real headache indeed for all of those who are trying to negotiate when the goalposts constantly change. So we will listen very carefully to what Mr. Šefčovič has to say, what he is able to share with us, but basically we are, of course, defending our position in these negotiations. Of course, we must stand up for our industrial model and for our economies and crucial, critical sectors for the European economy, such as farmers, at the same time, of course, standing up for workers across Europe, and in doing so, defend all of our European interests without giving in to US blackmail. An administration which tries to lure us into negotiations on legislation which, from our perspective, is simply untenable. So thank you very much indeed for listening. Very happy to take your questions.
Questions, if you could please introduce yourself with your name and media. We start with Laura.
Hola, Iratxe. Laura.
Good morning, Iratxe. I'm speaking on behalf of FA. Your group and other groups yesterday outlined disagreements with Mrs. von der Leyen. How will that have a bearing on your vote on Thursday? Have you considered an alternative, such as abstention, rather than voting against? Or do any members of your group plan to abstain? Thank you. Let me be crystal clear. I'm sure that this is a question that others of you may wish to ask. So let me be crystal clear. The Socialists and Democrats will not support the motion of no confidence. Let me be crystal clear. We will not vote in favour of the motion. What that means is that there are other options on the table. There are two further options. You could vote against or you could abstain. That decision will be taken tomorrow, depending on the outcome of discussions and negotiations that are underway, that began yesterday and will continue today and tomorrow.
Solo un follow-up rápido. ¿Sería un voto libre?
A quick follow-up. Will this be a free vote in the group?
¿Cómo se va a hacer?
I cannot say. I will not be able to tell you until after tomorrow.
Okay. Yes, please.
Buenos días, Vincenzo.
Good morning, Vincenzo Genovese from Euronews. You were saying that things cannot go on this way. You were saying that you have this double majority approach on the part of the EPP. What are the S&D planning to do in future? Are you planning to table a motion of no confidence? You know, from your perspective in future, what we are hoping is that the EPP and Manfred Weber will put an end to this duplicitous or double game, if you like. You know, he was talking about percentages, you know, the times that, you know, these are the number of times that they've voted with whomever. I mean, he's been going around with this piece of paper all week, you know, as though we were going to learn anything from that, you know, but enough with the numbers. I've got a question for Mr. Weber. If he really grasped what the message was from yesterday, then, you know, who's he going to be negotiating with in the European Parliament on the climate legislation? I mean, who is he going to negotiate with? Because, I mean, just today, in a coordinators meeting, the Patriots got the climate legislation brief. They have got the rapporteurship. I mean, it's the Patriots that are going to be the lead negotiators. So who is the EPP going to negotiate with? With the Patriots and all the others on the right, or with the pro-European groups? You know, I mean, basically it's as simple as that. That's what we want to know. And I'm talking about the climate law, obviously, because that is a crucial issue for our group, but also because, you know, all kinds of other related issues. I mean, you know, everything is at stake. Who is Mr. Manfred Weber and the EPP going to negotiate with on the climate legislation, for example? It's all well and good bandying around these numbers, but who's he going to go along with?
Hi, my name is Matthijs Schiffers, het Financiële Dagblad, Dutch Financial Times. I have a question around these figures that Manfred Weber is talking about. This 3% that has voted EPP, ECR, and PFE, and 7% in the case of 7% of the cases S&D together with PFE against EPP. According to him, this works. This says that you shouldn't complain about EPP working with the far right. But how do you see these figures, and how do you explain these figures? Thank you.
Yo no quiero entrar, insisto, no.
Let me be clear. I don't want to play games with figures. I think that is childish. Let me say one thing. You cannot use figures in this way. You can use figures to show all votes, looking at only the final vote, or you could break down votes on every single issue. There will be some occasions where the EPP votes on amendments together with the far right to rein in our ambitions. But when it comes to the final vote, there is an overall joint vote. So do you understand what I'm saying? If Mr. Weber might be looking at the final votes only, but the alliance with the far right may have a bearing on the content of the reports behind those final votes. But let me be clear, I don't want to get into a game with figures because there are many other things that are relevant that are happening in this House. As I said yesterday, I was very clear when you're looking at the votes, and Mr. Weber has his numbers, but he has not factored in there the EPP alliance with the far right. For the first time in this House, we have a working group to look into a committee of inquiry on environmental NGOs. That's not reflected in the figures, but it sends a very clear political message. His numbers do not reflect the fact that after voting in favour of negotiations on the Green claim, the EPP just a few months later said that that should be withdrawn and asked the Commission to withdraw its proposal on the Green claims. That's not reflected in his little piece of paper with all those different figures. He doesn't want to admit that, and we want to debate on serious political issues, not figures.
Good morning, Pietro Guassamacchio from ANSA. You mentioned that today you will be discussing the MFF during the COP and that you cannot accept an MFF that doesn't have a social fund. What are your options in case this proposal does not have what you required? How can you leverage into what can be the next steps?
Para que el marco.
Well, so for the MFF to survive, it will require a majority in this Parliament, and for that it's going to need the votes of the S&D. Of course, the European Commission could come forward with any proposal it likes next week, but then, of course, it will have to be debated in the Council, but then, eventually, it will make its way to the European Parliament, and our political group doesn't plan to vote in favour of an MFF without a social component, without a European Social Fund, and I think that that is abundantly clear. So, of course, all of this takes time, a great deal of time. We can't necessarily take a view on the overall proposal next week, but certainly the guidelines have been in the works in this Parliament for months now. And there's a strategy, of course, and we will be cooperating with the groups. But I emphasise that if the MFF is to survive, then it will need the votes of the S&D members.
We will close one. Yes, last question. Thank you. Iratxe.
Yeah, just one and very short. I would like to come back to the voting on Thursday, because there are gossips that the German socialists are considering abstaining, and we know that they are ruling together in Germany with CDU, EPP party. So do you know why they are going to do it?
Bueno, no hay.
The head of the German declaration has issued a statement to the press making clear that abstention is an option, but that is no different to what has been said by the group leader here this morning. We have a clear position. We will not vote in favour of the motion of no confidence, but there are two alternative options: abstention or voting against the motion. The decision we take will emerge after a debate involving all MEPs. We will listen to what everyone has to say and then form a group position. It is difficult to say at this juncture. We want to hear from all MEPs, all different delegations. In parallel, we have negotiations ongoing. We'll see what emerges there from negotiations, and Wednesday afternoon, we will conduct a group debate and we will decide on our position.
Como es la última rueda de prensa que
This is the last press conference before the summer break. I may see many of you next week in Brussels for the MFF presentation. But for those I will not see in Brussels, please allow me to wish you a pleasant summer break. Relax, rest up and come back batteries recharged, full of energy in autumn. Thank you.